Hi, I'm Lou Rosalie, and today we're going to unpack two very interesting topics that are pretty current and also on the opposite sides of the spectrum. The first is how friendships at work help collaboration and creativity, and second, what were the effects of COVID on producing at home? So, I would like to welcome our esteemed guests and panel of wonderful guys, professionals all in the media and entertainment production industry. With us today, we have Mr. Joe Scacciaferro. We have Mr.
Hello.
Frank Scacciaferro, and we have Scott Glozzi. Guys, thank you. You are all friends, and it's wonderful to see everybody. Well,
Yeah, same here, Lou. We're friends with you, too.
well, that's wonderful because friends is exactly what we're going to talk about today. And I want to highlight that today we're doing this, what's today's date? June 21st? 21st. And it's a couple of days after all the COVID restrictions are kind of lifted. And the Foo Fighters played Madison Square Garden, and it looks like production is kind of heading back. So that's really a good and interesting thing. Joe, let's talk about friends at work. We got a lot to do and a lot to talk about. You're a big friend maker. Tell me about it. Do you have friends at work?
You mean like Friends, the reunion show that just was in?
like Friends.
I have to say, it was good. I liked it a lot. Chandler seemed a little whacked, but other than that, it was good. No, yeah, I would probably say 80% of my closest friends are friends I've made over the years working together.
Right.
So, yeah.
Is it a benefit to you to have friends at work in terms of career-wise or profession, or does it play into, what goes on in terms of what you produce and create?
Yes. For the most part, it's a good thing because usually your friends, you all have the same mindset. You all have the same social interaction. You got things in common. So it makes a very stressful life. I mean, the environment we work in is pretty high stress, and it makes it a lot easier. But I'm going to add one caveat to that. My position, being a production owner, being a supervisor, basically being the boss, sometimes that becomes a bit of an issue because they're close friends of mine and may not necessarily agree with the direction I'm giving, and then there's that vibe. But for 90% of the time, that's no longer an issue. I've learned to adapt to it.
So you figured out the whole boundary thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Frank, I'm going to ask you this. What does it take for you to make a friend at work?
What does it take?
Yeah, like why would you actually try and become friends with somebody versus that guy or girl that you just have to speak to because you work with them?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
Because I can be friendly with most people, and I can talk to most people
Right.
about anything. But if you're saying a friend to a point where like you want to go out with them after work, or meet up somewhere outside of that, it would definitely take. If you get along right away, you can kind of figure that out, and then find some. I mean, just like making a friend anywhere, I guess. Like just finding same interests outside of not necessarily something work related to go hang out with them.
Right.
Yeah, I don't.
Lou, let me help set that up a
Go
little
ahead.
bit. So, Frank, when we're out on location and we strike for the day and everybody goes out,
Yeah.
the people that you'd gravitate to, if the whole crew's out together, you don't all hang as a group. You kind of spin off.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what Lou's looking at. What is that chemistry that moves it? Is it job related, or is it age related, or is it social, or a combination of all of those?
I would say definitely a lot of job related stuff, just because like especially in like being a big robo operator, like you're working together all the time anyway, and you got to know each other a lot closer rather than like maybe one of the audio guys or the director or like people like in a truck. So you already kind of have that history, I guess, of everybody working together, and then you can go share war stories out over having a drink or something like that. So it's definitely, I guess if you put it that way, yeah, it could be more work related and you gravitate towards those similar people. As far as age, I guess to compare it to sports, I've played up my whole life, And even in my career, I'm usually, younger by like 15 years, most people I work with. So I don't really find that as being an issue. So,
The the benefits of friendships at work are pretty much a kind of a cohesive thing of random getting together, random meetings in the hallways. You're bumping into people you've never met before. You're working with different crews around, around the country and the world. Scott, I got a question for you. Here's something that we never really thought about pre-pandemic, and it's the socializing at work. Now you've worked for a year and change at home or wherever you were doing whatever you had to do with Urban Visuals. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely lacking. There's no socialization. A lot of times, I like to be inspired by my coworkers. So if I'm doing something and they're working on something similar, it's just a matter of talking at work that separates a productive day from not so productive day. It's made me realize that I really do feed off of other people, teaching me and showing me things, and either whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. A lot of times at work, you feed off of other people's good habits, and sometimes you don't realize, but you feed off of their bad habits as well. So I think it was definitely lacking, and it definitely had a negative effect on me. But you find ways to overcome and get past it, and calling a coworker up, saying hello, kind of got me through some times where I was either stuck or in a rut, but yeah, it was definitely an underwhelming year for socializing with your coworkers. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe. You and I spoke about this in the past, and it's what Scott said or Gloss said, that running into people at work often. I know I keep falling back to calling them. Running into people at work, sometimes just gives you that inspiration, that little lift you need in the middle of the day, walking down the hall. And what I was talking about that you and I spoke about was Bell Labs, and how even at the World Wars, Bell Labs went to Jersey, moved out of New York City, and they actually designed their offices so that everybody would end up meeting in the hallways to walk to the cafeteria, so that scientists would meet with researchers, would meet with janitors, would meet with drivers, and a tremendous amount of innovation came from that. And I thought that was a pretty interesting fact, which is kind of what we're exploring today. But a direct question, Joe. Over the years of the COVID isolation, not having friends in the room, how has that affected your creativity or your process?
Oh, it changed it dramatically. Yes, and friends, yes, but friends that I respect, that are creatives, that are like Gloss he articulated it perfectly. You get used to, oh, I know he's really good at this, and I'm stuck on something. I can go talk to him, and even if it's unrelated. Now, my position is kind of in the center hub of all the different crafts. So when I'm thinking, yeah, this audio thing, but I can go to an audio guy and talk to him, and I can look at what his gear is, and then I hear something from a camera op. And a lot of times I pick up creative nuggets just from hearing conversations. When I hear, two camera guys sitting in a studio talking about something, or a camera guy talking to a lighting guy that I'm not even involved in, but it's that aura, that there's this floating creativity that's out there, that when you're sitting in your studio by yourself and you're talking to a screen, it doesn't happen because there's no spontaneity to anything. So the creativity, I'd say overall, it took a big hit. I would say that's, other than financially, creativity might be the second up on the list of what got slammed during 2020.
Yeah. Frank, you were one of the select group that actually got out and did some.
Lou, real quick, can I just jump on something he was
course.
saying? Just because of the creativity thing of going away, but I'll say on the other side of that, Glaz and I live together and we work together a lot in here, but it also, that not being able to go out to different studios and doing that stuff actually forced him and I to get a lot more creative of how we do stuff, and utilizing the room that we have in our apartment and kind of turning that into a studio, and using that and finding all different creative ways to actually, get something that we might need a studio for, or thought we needed a studio for, or a bigger space. So So that actually it kind of forced that out of us.
Yeah, great point, Frank.
Yeah, great point. And I've seen some of the work, and it's really great. Some of the urban visual stuff is fantastic that you guys are doing, and you did some great stuff for us as well. Frank, specifically, I want to talk about you going out into the COVID world and actually working. I want to hear a little bit about that, and I want you to just talk a little bit about that bubble production theory, and if you don't mind explaining what bubble production actually is.
Yeah, so I haven't had like a huge bubble production, but I know a lot of the guys that worked like the NBA playoffs last year. I mean, that was they had different tiers of the bubble, which I guess we kind of had doing like New York Giants stuff last year, and I guess all sports that I've done. So it in a different way, it was more of a tiered COVID thing where if you had we'll take doing like Knicks or Rangers like games and like that. There's a yellow zone and a red zone type of thing. So you would get if you were in the red zone, that meant you had contact with players, not like direct contact, but you would be closer to them. So that'd be anybody working specifically on the floor,
Right.
Any of the audio guys or camera guys or anybody that's working on the actual floor or on the ice. So for that, like we would have to get a PCR lab test 2-3 days prior to any game that we're working, and on top of that a rapid test the morning of the game, which is weird because then it also, like going back to what you said before about interactions with people, and a lot of that is going out to lunch with other camera guys, but it was also like we got like segregated, and so now you have a very say there's 15 other guys working that you would normally go out with or whatever for an hour. It kind of it made that circle much smaller of people to choose from to hang out with. You're kind of forced into that, which was a little strange because then it goes back to what you're saying, kind of takes that interaction away, and it just forced you to be with the same people all the time. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just that you would never have thought that would be a thing.
So they didn't segregate you or separate you by the craft or trade you did. It was contact levels. Like if you were with
proximity to the players, basically. I mean, because that's all they really care about is keeping them safe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Scott, you had to work through the year, and you had to figure out a way to create stuff and get stuff done. How'd you bring urban visuals through that? Frank touched upon it a little bit earlier about using the space that you had to create.
Yeah, well, there was definitely a lot of challenges. But what Frank said was spot on. We kind of moved our space or what we would be shooting on location into our apartment, which is pretty funny. And I mean, it boosted our creativity in a way. It's like we talked about earlier, how I said, coworkers would inspire me to go out and try new things. Now, the pandemic, the challenge that it provided was, how do I take these on location shoots and do them in my apartment? A big part of that was offering to clients that I will shoot your products for you. All you have to do is ship them to me, and then contact free. I'll never touch you. You'll never touch me. We'll never be within 6 feet. All you do is you ship your product here. I'll handle the rest. Frank and I will bring it in, figure out a creative way to shoot it here, which is on our pool table, funny enough. And we go from there, and Frank and I are creative enough to where when we put our heads together, we can really come up with, some really special, looking shots and really unique angles and, things like that. So it's half creativity and it's half thinking from a business standpoint. How do you get your clients to your apartment? I guess in a simpler way. So yeah, it was challenging, but it kind of made me look inward and learn a lot about myself and my business, and also restructure my offers. So now coming out of COVID, hopefully to take the next step, maybe eventually one of my goals is to eventually move into a studio space. Now I'm just even that much more ready to go from home to studio, so it kind of set me up for hopefully success.
So second topic is the pandemic's effects on home production or producing at home. I read a great article about ESPN and how they handled their whole process, which a lot of the other networks then followed or innovated at the same time. But in March in 2000, when they came up with it, they put together a committee for a live from home strategy. And what they did was they tried to figure out what's available, what pressures are out there, what technology's out there, and how do we come up with emergency solutions that will solve our need to produce stuff and cover things once they come back. And what happened was they actually came back with even more than that, and that's what I want to look into today. Joe, what's been your overall observations about the push on technology and production that COVID gave to the industry?
Interestingly enough, what I saw was the technology group, the tech managers, the EICs, the engineers in charge, all of them moved to the front of the line. Whereas before they always had to follow, the executives or the creatives or, well, this is the way we did it. All of a sudden they were in the front. Everybody relied on them. They had to pull everything together and then dictated what was being done backwards. So I found that fascinating. Being in this business a long time, techs usually are on the outside wings of what's going on. And the technology was heading in that direction, evident by, Frank's career and everybody like his career. All the remote, all the robotics, all that stuff now came to the forefront rather quickly. I had predicted about a 10-year move. Even studio robotic cameras, which both of them have been around in studios, didn't really have the prominence that they will have now. And then on the financial side, which is another big driver, is they realized they don't need to keep all this real estate. They don't need to spend the $1 million a month on studio rent in New York City, LA, Chicago. They can do a lot of this utilizing all this new tech that they've pioneered in 1 year. And I hate drawing, analogies to anything that's real. But the way the vaccine got developed so fast in a year, which is normally an 8-year run, the same kind of thing, not anywhere near as important, but the same kind of thing happened in our industry. Everybody joined together and started sharing technological information. And there wasn't all that holding it back and not telling anybody. Everybody was seeing what everybody was doing. I was on calls with people, calling me up saying, hey, about this. How does that fit into that? And all of them, even the camera ops and the audio guys and everybody, because everybody had to play a technical part in this new development. So it was a need that had to. It was like a triage of new inventions. It was kind of cool to go through. Not the pandemic, not all the personal stuff. Though I don't start yelling at me about that, because I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm saying purely in the silo of technology and the movement that happened in our industry.
Right. And Joe, you said something interesting. I think that the listening for the people who were in the back and now are in the front has improved, and I think that added a tremendous amount of value to the industry, because they often had a lot to contribute, and they were always like, oh no, just keep plugging stuff in, you'll be fine, and I think that's that was an important shift in the industry as well. Frank, how has specialty camera changed throughout this?
Definitely made it more, just going off of exactly what Joe was just saying, it made it more necessary, and other people kind of innovating off of what was already there, or just utilizing things way more because of all these, mostly what I do, for the most part, everything's remote to a point where you don't need to be on a set or on the actual floor of an arena or anything like that. So it definitely made it more abundant in the industry, because especially in like basketball, like those two handheld positions that are under the basket, those went away and turned into two robotic cameras. So anybody who had those skills already, there was a lot of work everywhere. Not even in just sports, but in news, like you said, setting up those remote cameras in people's houses. Like, people are controlling those from somewhere. So it made it a lot more abundant. And then for all the people that didn't do that in the first place, would either learned quickly or saw the need to kind of up their skill set and jump into that position. So fortunately I was already in that part of the industry, so it was just good timing.
Yeah. Scott, you've done a Steadicam, and Steadicam to me, from what I've observed, being the novice in the group, it's kind of like an in-your-face camera type thing. Like the guy's running with it, the camera operator, the girl is like they're there, they're following you, they're like, you know, right there. Do you see any disadvantage to that becoming kind of a robotic thing now, or had it, or having it had been a robotic thing during the isolation?
Well, yes and no. I think that Steadicam is always a way to put a camera in a unique position that you couldn't otherwise get with a hard camera or a, you know, like as Frank does, like robotic cameras or a jib or things like that. You know, part of the reason I'm tethered to a cable and have someone with me is so that wherever I'm going, I'm not getting tripped up or backtracking the wrong way and falling over my cable. So I think by replacing it, you know, you lose that sense of movement, you know, and that's kind of why the camera was developed, so you can carry someone across a set. You can bring somebody, you know, up the stairs like that famous Rocky shot you get. You know, you couldn't do that with other cameras. So yes, I think that it kind of it takes away the unique view of what a Steadicam lends to a production. Yes, and no, because you needed to have hands off during the pandemic. There was no way to really have a Steadicam in talent's face, you know, because I'm going to be within that 6 feet. Like you said, it's a very intimate camera. You know, I'm basically right in your face. You always have a wide lens. I always have somebody right next to me making sure I can't move. So there was really no way to replace that without, you know, just getting rid of it completely. And unfortunately, that's what happened. So yes and no.
Yeah. So I want to go back.
Yeah, Lou, Lou, let me just give you, because I'm looking at it from these are all tools. That, you know, if in my position, director, producer, you utilize all that you have around you. So you look at, okay, I know Glaz can do this, get me this shot. I know he can do this. I know that Frank's going to do that. So when that gets blown up and your tools get cut down, think of it like a carpenter. You know, you have all this extended toolbox. You have the right tool for the right job, as my dad used to say. But when somebody takes all your tools away and you only have two, it completely changes your scope. So you have to create differently. You have to think differently. Now that everything starts going back, you go back to, we're going to start pulling the tools that you need immediately, the tools that you rely on heavily. Steadicam, as Glaz just described, is one of those cameras. I mean, it gets you phenomenal shots. It can move. It can do things. And you can think of it quickly as you're directing. You can just make that happen. That fluidness, all that film and television, episodic work, that camera's critical to everything. No different than the overheads and all that. But going to that point, that'll be one of the first things coming back. So as we rebuild, there's going to be things that are going to come back immediately because we need them. We need them to be visually creative.
I think that's an interesting thing that you said, having that directorial viewpoint of things. These networks that we've spoken about have put together these home kits, and they pretty much came up in 4 packages. One was a studio kit, which would have like an on-air host in the studio. The other one was a kind of a remote, what is it called? When you're calling a game. Commentary, that's it. Big sports fan that I am. There was a remote commentary kit that had all the feeds for research and statistics and all of that. Then there was the producer director kit, and then there was a graphics kit. And all these people were all in different places, as you know, working from their homes. How does he? This is for any of you guys. Joe, you spoke about that being the director or the producer in the room. You're not in the room. Like, how would you know to call Scott Glazzy on the Steadicam? Hey, dude, come over here. Here's a really cool shot. Because everything you're watching is now through a screen. You know, you're not in that environment to make that call. Like, look at that. That's really interesting. How does that get done remotely? Or can it?
It does. Actually, if for a producer director, it doesn't really change our job or our positioning. Because, and let me just set the scene, producers, directors are, Frank mentioned a truck. Those are control rooms on location, and in a studio, they're the control room. When in the control room, you have a multi-viewer which is in front of you, which has every camera, all the stats, all the graphics, everything else. And then you have comms. So you can talk to, so we're all instinctively used to talking to the cameras that are out somewhere. I can't see what they see. I'm in a box, but I can see what their camera sees. And that's how we communicate with them, and that's how we move shots around. So we've adapted to that over the course of our career. So going remote wasn't hard for us. What was tricky for me was usually I have a producer next to me, or I have an associate next to me. I can yell. Control rooms are very noisy places because, yeah, you got comms, but you just start yelling at each other in the room, and it gets pretty hectic. And they're laughing because they're hearing the yelling that's going on in the control room, and they don't know what's happening inside.
Right.
Because they're in a very quiet environment. It's very nice. They're in their studios, and they're sitting there watching what's going on, and they're talking. Meanwhile, in the control room, there's 15 people. Oh, put up the graphic. Pull that thing down. Get that thing out of there. Blah, 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 blah. And everybody's just yelling. That went away.
Right.
So that energy, even the bad and good energy, it's all hype. And once we lost that, it really became kind of quirky.
Yeah.
Because you can't see. And I'm going to keep going. The commentators that you were talking about, the color all those people that call the games, they're usually live. They're usually in the arena or they're in the stadium and their windows are open. So they're not looking necessarily at what the cameras are seeing or what the director's calling. They're looking at the whole thing. So they can, wow, there was a great block over on the right side that broke him loose that went down the thing. The audience didn't see that. Smart directors will follow that. Will go, oh, he's talking about that. Get a replay real quick of that shot from camera 3. And then they roll that in. So they're following what he's saying, not necessarily him saying what he's seeing. That changed.
Wow.
Yeah, so I want to go back. Talking about the socialization part, Joe, and you're going to think this is funny. And Frank, so are you. Because one of my favorite parts is when the control room does get hectic, and then you hear like, all right, ready, one, camera. I can't take 2. Like, camera 3's in front of 2. All right, ready, 2, go 2, take 2. You know, like those are always the funniest interactions between producers, directors, and all, because you know how crazy it is, and it's live, number one, and then they're all yelling at each other, and all the cameramen are looking at each other, kind of like cracking smiles, like, this is great, I love this. Yeah. You know, so that is one part, going back to socialization in the workplace, that I do miss. I haven't had that in a while, and I'm lacking that in my life right now. I need some yelling.
Exactly. Frank, if your only choice in your career was to work from home, look, you're a robo guy, you're a specialty camera operator, you are now not coming anywhere but your house. You're shaking your head.
I would change careers.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk more about it. Why? What would you miss so much? What's so important about being out there?
Number one, I can't be... I haven't taken a staff job at a place because I don't like working in the same place all the time, and I don't like doing the same thing all the time. I like the freelance, hectic part of that career, of traveling somewhere else, meeting different people like constantly. That I will never change. I don't think. So no, I would never. It was horrible being here. Like not because I live with Glaus, but it was just he was the only person I saw for like 6 months.
That sucks. That's
and
horrible.
Like then not being able to have like hands-on, like doing something that I enjoy doing, and trying to, going through challenges of being in a different environment of whatever that, production entailed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was too simple here. I couldn't do an office job of going to the same, even if it wasn't my apartment, couldn't go do that. So I
totally
short answer, yeah, I would change careers.
Lou, let me just give you a social. It's a social and it's a thing. Ferro Productions, for all the years that I've run it, and even Triple S prior to that, which is the company in the music world, I basically always considered my crew and my company as a pirate ship. Basically, we're just a bunch of knuckleheads who are very good at what we do, but we have to be on the move. We have to be at sea. We have to see different ports.
Yeah.
60% of what this industry is that. is the travel, is going out, is meeting new people, is being in places that you've never been. Going on vacation to a place, that's great. It's fun, but it's not nearly as fun as going to that place and working, because it's a totally different vibe. And when you're on the pirate ship, it's even cooler, because then you leave with that same crew, and then you carry that storyline with you.
Yeah.
And it builds all of the things you were alluding to throughout this conversation. So yeah, I'm glad nodded throughout Frank's entire thing was no. I think we'd all quit.
I think so too.
I would go out on another job that allowed me to travel all around the world. I don't know.
That was a great analogy, Joe.
Give it up.